Hey, this is Sal, and this is my show. What's up, everybody? For anyone wondering why I'm sitting on the floor, it's Arts and Crafts Day. What I'd like to talk to you about today is these nice little paracord bracelets. Now, I know you see these things just about everywhere now, convenience stores, grocery stores, what have you. Uh, what I want to show you, though, today is how I make them. I've been making them for a while, and I got a request to do this video because my uncle would like to know how as well. So here we go. Now the concept behind these things is actually fairly straightforward. I mean, you just get your 550 cord. Well, I use 550 paracord. You can use whatever weight you want, but you just kind of weave them together. The tricky part for me was finding a way to actually weave them and hold it still and put them together in a way that, you know, for the average person that doesn't have, four different hands, because I only have, the two. So I went ahead and constructed a jig. Now, this rack right here isn't necessary for this. Like I said, I'm sure there are different easy ways to weave one of these, but I found making one of these was the easiest. And before we really get into what kind of cord to use or how to do that, I want to talk very briefly about the construction of this jig. Now, this thing really isn't that complicated to put together. It's not too much work. I did it maybe about, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour or something. It wasn't that complicated. I'm going to scoot up closer so you can see all the moving parts here. What it really consists of is three 18-inch 2x4 pieces of plywood for the main structure. Here's the one side wall, here's another one, and then this middle piece right here that runs the entire length is another 18-inch piece of 2x4. What I did underneath here is I put a 2-inch by 4-inch section as a strut to keep these legs, I guess, from moving back and forth. I put another piece of the same measurement here and screwed that in to act as the head base. And this is a 4x4 roughly section with a wing nut and bolt attached that I can use to change the length for whoever's wrist I'm making. Now this part right here, let me go ahead and take this wing nut off so I can show you how it's put together. So I went ahead and cut my piece of plywood, drilled a hole through it, and it sits in between these gaps here. When I measured this up, I actually left a little bit of part sticking up here, so whenever I weave in here, I actually have kind of a trench where I can put my fingers in, so I'm not having to knock my hands against the bottom of it. Just gives me a little bit of extra room. But anyway, so that fits in between these runners, and you cut, however long of a trench or a cut in the middle of the wood here that mounts over it. Flip this thing over, and you put your bolt through your 1-inch washer here, and that slides up and goes into that hole, and it acts as a keeper on the bottom. Now on the top, you put, I think this is like a 3/4 washer. It's the only one I had. You can use whatever size you want. That goes on top. Wing nut goes on, and then you can just kind of hand tighten it. Whoops. And it should stay. And then you loosen it. You can slide it to wherever you need. Retighten it. Ta-da. Easy peasy. And what I've attached up here is actually, it's a zip tie with an eyelet. So I went ahead and put a screw through that eyelet there and attached one end, like an open clip, the female end, for the bracelet up here, and then went on the bottom and did the same thing but with the male end. And so that way when I'm weaving this sucker, I can actually, before I even get started, I go ahead and insert one end of the bracelet that I want in here, and come on, the other in the bottom. So pretend this isn't woven yet, but that way I can weave it. So when I'm done, I pop these clips off, like so, and ta-da, finished product. Important thing to note, if you want to put a measurement guide on the side, make sure that this part lines up flush here, and then this part of the male connector lines up flush, or your measurement will be off. Because that way, say if I want to set it to 7 inches, I tighten it down, and this area to this area right here is 7 inches, and that's going to be the part of the cord that's actually in contact, or the part that actually makes the circumference around the wrist. So, important thing to note there. Well, part 2 of this little introduction, we're going to discuss, before you even start weaving anything, the type of cordage that you really want. That's up to personal preference. You know, if you're just making it for decorative aspects, whatever, you know. For a survival aspect, though, it's very important you get the right kind. I feel I should mention that. This, what I have right here, is standard mil-spec 7-strand true 550 cord. Solid nylon construction for the outside shell. The inside is 7 strands of twisted nylon. Don't be fooled by a lot of knockoff companies that make it out of cotton or some cheap polyester or something. You want the nylon, because nylon melts, it does not burn. And that's very important whenever you're trying to seal the end of one of these things. And I'm going to cut a section of this fiber off. The best way to tell is that it melts. So if I come up here and I put a little flame to it, see that it melts and turns into one big glob, and that's very important for trying to seal one of these off. So don't get fooled. I mean, they make different weights of this. I use 550 just because it's common, it's standard, and it works. They make different weights, like 220, 330, whatever. And they make it all different kinds of colors. I'm just using black because that's what I got on hand right now. But you can make this whatever you want. I mean, the one I have here is actually, it's actually like Marine Corps digital forest camo pattern. It's pretty cool. I don't know. I like it. Okay, on to the fun stuff. Let's get to actually making one of these things. The supplies that we're going to need are, of course, your cord. We've already been over that. We're going to need some sort of cutting tool for the cord, scissors. We're going to need a heating device. I'm going to use a lighter to seal the ends. Some sort of measuring device. I don't know where my tape measure ran off to. It's probably hiding somewhere in the void that my other socks went to. I don't know. For this, a ruler will work. I already know my wrist size, which is around 6.5 inches, so pre-measure yourself before you get started on this. And lastly, you're going to need these fasteners for the clasps. I got this on eBay for like $5 or something. It was super cheap. It comes in a pack of 30, and these are 5/8 inch fasteners. And they come bundled together with the male and female like this, and they just clip together. Okay, as I showed y'all earlier, I already measured out the length here on the side, which makes it a little bit more convenient for me. I'm going to go ahead and make one for my uncle, and I think he has about the same wrist diameter as my dad. And so all the circumference around his wrist, let's go ahead and say it's like 8 3/4 to 9 inches. So I'm going to move it down to where it needs to be, tighten it down so we're not moving around while we're trying to work. And with these fasteners here, the ones that I got, pay attention to the contour. I want you to notice that it curves like this. It's not straight across. So when I put these on, what I go ahead and do is I put the curve coming up. So that way when I'm weaving this thing, the outside shell is facing downwards, and that just gives me more room to work. I don't know why I do it that way. I just prefer to. It seems easier to me. You go ahead and, you know, more power to you. Do however you want to. Now I measured for someone with a 9-inch wrist. It's you're going to want about 84 inches of cord, so that translates to 7 feet. And this part's actually pretty important, the direction that you make your first knot. What you want to do is from the top of the contour, you want to put it through the top here, like so. Make a loop, and then feed the two tails through it. And the reason this is important is because it's how the bracelet is going to sit. That way you have this sort of thing on top here. Because look, whenever it's situated like this, I want you to notice the two tails are positioned towards where the, let me see if you can see that, towards where the top of the bracelet would be. If it's on the bottom, it's going to be digging into your wrist, and you don't want that. And so now, once you've made your first loop in the top here, you go ahead and you plug it into the bottom. You plug it into the top fastener. And what you want to make sure here is that your two tails here, your two lines are straight, so that they're not, don't get them crossed or twisted or anything. Make sure they're like that. You bring it out, and you want to feed them through what would be the top mounted this way, the bottom of your other fastener, and pull it, plug it back in. So now you see we have your core. Now, in order to secure this core here and make it taut, you want to pull it not super tight, but tight enough to where it's not all, there's no give really too much in here. You bring it underneath like so, and you just want to tie it off and make an overhand knot, which is essentially, it's that first, for those of you who don't know, I messed that up. For those of you who don't know, it's the first stage in tying your shoe. So it's that part that goes, you have your two laces like so, and you put one over the other like that. And so when you pull that tight, there's not a whole lot of give here, and then you can actually start weaving. The weave that we're going to do for this, there's a myriad of different kinds of weaves that you can do. What we're going to do for this one, it's called, I think it's called a cobra knot, and it's actually essentially of kind of alternating overhand knots that shift from the left to the right. And so what I want you to see here, before we get really too in depth on this, is, let's see, this part, for me it's on the left. This strand comes up from the top, and this one actually comes up from the bottom. So for this first part, we're going to take the one that's on the left, the one that's higher, drop it over the top, and make a loop here. You take this part, and you bring it underneath. You bring it underneath your core, and pull it till you have another loop right here on the side. And then you take your strand from the left, and you feed it through the loop on the right. So you get an overhand knot like that. So when you pull it tight, it shifts to the right side. The knot shifts to the right. And so when you do this again, you reverse it. You take instead of putting the one on the left over the top, you put the one on the right over the top, make your loop, bring the left hand lace up underneath the core through that loop, and make one on this side. You take your right hand lace, you put it through that one, and pull it taut, and the knot shifts to the left. And you just repeat that process all the way down. And I'm probably going to cut it here and do a quick little time lapse, so you don't have to sit here for 10 minutes watching me weave this thing all the way up. And I'll catch you whenever I get to the end. If you're having trouble with this, or remembering rather which side you just did or which side goes on top, if you look there, whatever side the knot is on, the last side that you did, whatever side the knot right here is on, that's the side that needs to go over the top. So look for that. If it's on the left thread or the left tail needs to go over the top. If it's on the right side needs to go over the top. Okay, now we've got this thing mostly woven. An important note here is, take it off of here. Make sure that there's maybe about half an inch of play left here on the core, so that way we can, when we tie it off, we actually have room for the knot there. So that way, because if you weave it all the way to the top, you'll have a big old knot sticking out the top or under the bottom, and that's not what you want. You want it to be as flush as possible. Um, I should have probably mentioned this earlier though. You know, if you're unsure about your measurement, always go more than you expect you'll need because, of course, you know, you can always cut it shorter later on, but, you know, it's hard to put it back on without, you know, unweaving this whole thing, cutting a new strand, and doing it all over again. So anyway, at this point, we're pretty much done. All we got to do is tie it off, and that'll be it. So, you have this part done. You have two tails sticking off this little section. Okay, how do we tie it off? Um, there's different schools of thought on this. There's tons of different ways. You know, you can look up alternate ways to tie off the end of this if you like. I'm just going to show you the way that I do it. So what we go ahead and do is we go ahead and make a simple overhand knot over the top, pull it tight. And the reason we left this gap here is you want to take that starting loop near the fastener there, and you want to pull it up a little bit. So that way there is, let's see if you can see that. Now you have a loop there. You're going to take the two tails like so and feed them both through that, just like that. Pull that tight, set it up, pull the clasp tight, and so you have the two tails coming out vertically now. And all we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and cut it. I cut it pretty close to the edge here, and you cut the tails off so you have your two stubs. Where's my lighter? And you want to take your lighter and start melting. Now be very, very careful at this point. One, that you don't burn the surrounding material, and two, remember this is nylon, and so it melts, and so it pretty much turns into molten plastic. So don't don't get it on your skin if you can avoid it, because yeah, that can lead to some pretty serious burns. I've burned my fingers pretty bad before, and it's not fun. But anyway, what you want to do is you want to put the flame to it. You don't want to necessarily melt it completely. You just want to get it to where it's soft, and then use like the edge of the lighter and smash it a little bit, and so it melts together. And so you'll end up with something looking like that. And then when you put it up like this, you have a small knot on, you have a small knot on the end. And that's it. We're done. I've never had a bracelet like this come apart. It seems to be a fairly secure method. It's low profile. It doesn't get in the way of stuff. Just the most important part is make sure that these are all melted together here, and it's not gonna come loose out of that loop there. The benefit to having, excuse me, benefit to having it like this is the tighter that this clasp pulls, the tighter that this loop pulls down on the ends. So there you have it, one completed paracord bracelet. Like I said earlier, there are tons of different kinds of weaves that you can do. This is just your standard cobra knot ladder rack weave. Um, if you're interested in doing this, just, you know, the information is readily available on the internet. Just go up. You can weave all kinds of different colors into here. You can put stripes. You can use two different kinds of colored paracord. You know, just make it as fancy as you want to. This is just a very, very basic tutorial. I hope you'll learn something, and I'll see you next time.